All right, so we're holding by Book of Leviticus chapter 17. Again, we're holding by Book of Leviticus chapter 17. We're in verse 7. Still working our way through verse 7, where the Torah says, Lo yizbechu devchem v'seirim asher heim zoinim achareim chukas olam tiyeh zois lahem ledorasam. So here the Torah says that you're not allowed to sacrifice sacrifices to demons, right? It's Erim that these goats, I guess that people thought they were like demons, who you go astray. It's an eternal decree to them for their generations, right? So again, last week spoke more about the zodiac, the heavenly influence of the stars, and all that. So comes along the Rabbeinu B'chai, and the Rabbeinu B'chai over here says, right? It says like this. Rabbeinu B'chai says, first of all, or we mentioned before, let's just say better, that we mentioned before that according to many rabbinic authorities, this was not idolatry. It sounds like idolatry. Sounds like they worship these demons, but really, it wasn't considered idolatry, right? According to many rabbinic authorities. So the Rabbeinu B'chai said that when the Jews were in Egypt, there was a tremendous, There's a tremendous desire, tremendous urge, so to speak, to go after this wisdom. And they were drawn towards it. Right? They were drawn towards it. Why? Because they wanted to know the future. Right? They wanted to know what's going to be in the future. So why over here does the Torah call them Seirim? Why does it call them goats? Because these demons, that's how they would look. That's how they appeared. Right? Seemingly that's how they appeared. In other words, someone who saw them was tremendously afraid. Tremendously afraid. But here, again, it's kind of hard to understand in different ways. Because going after idolatry today, it's not the same as it once was. I think it was King Achav came to Rav Ashi, one of the later rabbis of the Talmud, and Rav Ashi asked him, I get so caught up in idolatry. But he showed to be an unbelievable rabbinic scholar. Started asking Rav Ashi all kinds of questions he couldn't answer. So Rav Ashi asked him, so if you're so bright and you know so much Torah, how is it possible you got caught up in idolatry? Right? Oops. Right? How is that possible? How is that possible? You got caught up. Right? Got caught up in idolatry. It doesn't seem like it's something that should have happened. Right? It don't make sense. So Achav said, Achav told him, if you would have been in my generation, you would have run after its kotas. That was the draw. Now, even though there is idolatry today, right? This type of thing, yeah, you get people with, I don't know, tarot cards, where they know what they're doing, they don't know what they're doing. There's alternative type of things. We live in a very Amaleki world. People very cynical. Comes to religion. Very cynical when it comes to God and belief and all that. Yeah, you got Bible thumpers. You got thousands of Bible thumpers out there. Okay. One of the last classes I took in college, I took in university, was about New Age religions. Not about Wicca, other things. But these are like fringe things. These are not things that are mainstream. They're definitely not mainstream. Christianity is mainstream. Islam, mainstream. Buddhism, mainstream. Hinduism, mainstream. Like you have other things with crystals and, and Wicca and other things, not mainstream. Definitely not mainstream. Not going to be considered a major religion by any stretch. But sorcery and these type of things, giving power to things that really didn't have independent power, even though they understood, like Pharaoh and others, that God is so great, God is so lofty. He gives power to other things in the world. Because he's too busy, keeping the earth on its axis. He's too busy making sure we don't get too close to the sun or too far away. Otherwise, we get burnt, incinerated, or frozen. He's busy keeping black holes, keeping nature intact. What's he going to care about us? What does that have to do with us? They didn't deny God existed. That they didn't deny. Even though Pharaoh says, who's this God I should listen to? Didn't deny it didn't exist. What he did deny was, in others, is that he gave over authority to other things, to other forces. Now, says the Ramchal, in Derech Hashem, these forces only have power because God wields it. They don't have independent power. They'll never have independent power. Certainly goes against the Rambam's first of 13 principles. God is absolute. Because if he's absolute, he doesn't change. He's got no needs. Nothing outside of him. Everything has power through him. If they have independent power, he's not absolute, right? By definition. So today, in quote unquote, the modern world, very hard thing to wrap our brains around. People be caught up in this stuff. It's very hard to understand. But I have said to Rav Ashi, in my day, right, back in the day, very, very powerful. People ran after it. So here the Rabbeinu Bachai explains. Simple explanation is people are curious about the future. They want to know what the future is going to bring. Who doesn't want to know what the future is going to bring? People are curious. So people will tap into things that'll help them get that information. And he says when the Jews were in Israel, this wisdom was very prevalent. Right? People think of Egypt as being a depraved place full of stufe zima, immorality, unbelievable immorality. But it was also saturated with what? Sorcery. Remember, one of the plagues, plague I think of Kenim, of life, right? It's something that the sorcerers couldn't replicate. They were embarrassed. Sorcery played a major role here, right, in this society. Now, where does sorcery play a major role today? Not in the Western world. Definitely not in the Western world. It's on the East. It's on the Far East. Very interesting. The children of Keturah, who was Hagar, who Avram married after Sarah died, and a whole bunch of children with her. And what did he give them? He gave everything spiritually to Yitzchak. What did he give to them? He gave them, the Torah says, gave them matanot. Right? He gave them gifts. That's what he gave them. The Rashi says, what did he give them? Shemus Atuma. Names, impure names. Gave them the ability to tap into sorcery. Now, of all the gifts he could have given them, oh, by the way, it says he gave them these gifts and he sent them to the East. Now, we understand the East to mean the Far East. That's where they ended up. But I mentioned this before. I don't know if I have a good answer. Right? I'll mention my Rebbe's answer here. Right? And that is, why send sorcery? Of all things, to give him his gifts. Why allow them to play with fire? No pun intended. That's what sorcery is. You're playing with fire. Right? Maybe we'll go into a little bit. But why? Spiritually, I understand. He gave whatever he knew, about Torah mitzvahs, gives to Yitzchak, gives to Isaac. And to the children of Keturah, he gives them these gifts. These impure names from the dark side, let's say. Let's call it. So says Moed Rebbe, Arav going to Moshe Lito should be well. Brings down in Tam Vadas, commentary on Chumash. And over there he says, what's the reason? Because he wanted to show that the more they're into this, into sorcery and whatever, they're going to go far away from Judaism. They're not going to have any connection to anything Jewish at all. They're going to go in a totally different direction. So he gave them something to attract them. And through that attraction, they're going to go very far away. So they won't have any, you won't make the mistake and say, oh, these are, Oriental Jews, so to speak. They just sort of went off doing these other things. No. He wanted to push them so far, Rebbe says, just get rid of them. They shouldn't have any connection to us whatsoever. And he sends them to the Far East. Okay. Now, why would I say I have issue with this? Because it's still hard to understand. You're letting people play with fire, literally. It could cost them their lives. Sorcery, not something to be messed with. Even if you could say, certain incantations and certain names of God and do this and do that, maybe save tens of thousands of people. You could pay with it for your life. You could die. Right? One of the rabbis goes up to heaven, in front of the heavenly court, and says, let me say one ineffable name of God, and I'll be able to save the Jewish people from exile and destruction during the time of the Second Temple. And what do they say? What did the heavenly court say? So Ray said, I said, no, not allowed to. This is the decree, and that's it. Put it back in his body, finished, destruction came. That was a decree, can't stop. But even using, it's brought down according to Jewish law, Even using a name of God on the pure side, not the dark side. You're not allowed to do it even to save lives. Even to save lives, you can't. Why not? Because God does not want you to tap into that. That's not what he wants. Even to save lives. Now, someone will ask the $1 million question, right? What's the $1 million question? $1 million question over here is, right? $1 million question is going to be, so why did he create it? Why did he allow people to tap in? Right? You can ask a more general question. More general question is, God created evil. Big problem for Christians. Because what do they do with Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7? Isaiah over there says God created evil. They totally mistranslate like they're good at. They totally mistranslate. Because where does all evil come from according to them? Mr. S. The Satan, the evil inclination, the angel of death. Very good. Blame him. Because God is all good. True. We also believe God is all good. But if there's evil in the world, how can God be good? So what do? They blame it on, quote unquote, a fallen angel. Judaism doesn't believe in fallen angels. Totally doesn't believe in fallen angels. Angels don't have free will. Angels can only do one task at a time. Where do we see that? Parshas Vayera. You see that Abraham has 3 guests, looking for guests, got 3 Arabs. But they're really angels. Right? So Rashi says over there, what were they there for? One was to heal him from circumcision. One was to tell Sarah he's going to have a child. And the other is, what was the other? To overthrow Sodom. So one thing you see beyond the shadow of a doubt is, they can't do more than one thing. God sends them on, to do something. That's all. That's it. That's all they can do. They can't veer off. That is their job. That essentially is their job. They can't do more than that. So the Ramchal in Derech Hashem says, very good. So why did God put evil out there? What's the purpose of evil? To test people. Could a person tap into it? Yes. Could they do absolutely horrendous things? God doesn't stop them? Yes. But God gave us free will. We're the only being that has free will. Animals are programmed. Right? Animals only have the nefesh behemoth. They only have that soul, that aspect of the soul. Right? The animalistic soul. We have more aspects of the soul. Well, God breathed in the spirit of life. God gave us the Aramaic translation says the Ruach Mamalalo, gave us the ability to speak. The ability to speak means to reason, to make decisions. Animals also speak. I mean, last time I checked, I didn't play Dr. Dolittle, and I could speak with the animals. They have their own language. There was a time there were certain people who could understand, let's say, the language of the birds, the Gemara says. But in general, we don't understand what they say. But they don't make decisions. They are born and bred on instinct. Human beings, totally different. Because God gave us a soul. God gave us that ability. Right? He gave us that ability. You can make good decisions. And God forbid you can make bad decisions. Right? 100%. Either way. Either way. You can make good or bad decisions. So now, based on that, person wants to have stronger influence, more power. So what do they want? Now, to use a force on the dark side, you don't have to be on a high spiritual level. You know how to say a certain incantation, Say it the way you need to say it. Very good. You can have control. Right? Maybe you can control certain angels, different things, whatever it may be. The Torah says many times, don't do this. You're not supposed to know the future. Right? You're supposed to live for now. You don't know what's going to be in the future. But it doesn't want you tapping in. Right? So the $1.5 million question, now we just up the ante is, so why do you give it? What's the whole purpose of putting it out there? Answer is to test people. To test people what they're going to tap into. They want to tap into the right thing, very good. They'll get reward. They want to tap into the wrong thing. Again, what does the Gemara say? We mentioned many times. The Gemara says like this: you want to go on the right path, God will help you. You want to go on the wrong path, God will not stop you. You got a golden opportunity. But there's a balance. If you want to go on the wrong path, you could. No one's stopping us. What's stopping a Jew right now have a ham sandwich? Nothing. What's stopping them from eating shrimp or doing other forbidden things? Nothing. You say we have a moral compass, this, that. But people do what they want to do. And they justify what they want to do. But he gives people the ability to make wrong decisions. Not what he wants. We mentioned this before, a few weeks back. The Torah says, let us make man in our image. What do you mean we? Who's we? So God's talking to the heavenly court. Does he have to? No. Is he showing humility? Yes, but it's even more graphic, Rashi says. Because Rashi says, by Sodom, the Torah says, let us go see what's going on in Sodom. Who's we? Same thing. Talking to the heavenly court, showing his humility. But Rashi goes further. And Rashi says that a person can make a serious mistake and think there's more than one God. They can think there's more than one God. They can make that serious mistake. True. They very well could make that mistake. Does God want you to make that mistake? No. But he gives you free will. So Rashi says, even though a person can make that mistake, Torah wrote it that way. God spoke that way. But he wants people to do the right thing, clear. That's nothing to talk about. You want to make your own mistake? You want to tap into something you shouldn't be tapping into? Your choice. 100% your choice. But this whole idea, is why I'm harping on it, this whole idea is very foreign to us. Anyone who grew up in the Western world. Very, very foreign. Because the stuff about sorcery, whatever, a lot of people don't believe in the power of a Ouija board or other things. This is what Amalek brought to the world, doubt, major doubt about supernatural. There's no such thing as supernatural. So they wouldn't believe that's the world we live in. We live in that world. We also live in a Greek world. But at the same time, over here, you're going to say, we don't have a connection to this. We have very little connection. More prevalent in the Far East. So one of my rabbis once told me, you see what goes on in the Far East? What goes on in the Far East is you have many times there are quote unquote natural disasters, typhoons, tsunamis, landslides, all kinds of things. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the States, doesn't happen in other places, but certainly per capita in that part of the world, much more prevalent. Much, much more prevalent. These things. These quote-unquote natural disasters, which we don't hold of natural disasters. God's sending a message. But why? Why specifically over there? What's so bad? What's so bad about that part of the world that they get exponentially more of these things than anywhere else? Right? So one of my rabbis explained, because it's steeped in idolatry. It's for sure steeped in idolatry. And it's also steeped in sorcery. Idolatry, though, worse. So there, idolatry for what it is, much more prevalent than in the Western world. Doesn't mean idolatry doesn't exist. Right? But these questions you have to ask. Why should it be over there? Exponentially. Right? Exponentially being that way. We never think that. Right? You say, well, it's their bad luck they live there. Yeah, it's their bad luck. But God runs the world. So there's something going on there God doesn't like. Direct punishment for whatever they do. Same thing. You look at the continent of Africa, right? Not going to be very popular to say. Africa's been dealt with, famine, wars. Nothing's ever come out of it. Nothing good's ever come out of Africa. Right? If you don't believe in the curse of Ham, right? What happened, by Noah, that wouldn't make any sense logically. Even if you tell me they're enslaved, but enslaved by the British, enslaved by the French, enslaved by others also. Right, for the last 400 or 500 years, very good. How long, right? I asked this question before. How long would it take for a country to get back on its feet after devastation? Right, after wars and famine and all that. How long would it take before they start becoming successful? 50 years? 100 years? They're going to take 200 years, 500 years. I can't imagine, it's that significant amount of time. Okay, you got to replenish the natural resources, other things. I get it. It's going to take time. Okay. But since colonization stopped, they've been given freedom. What has happened in that part of the world? Disaster. An absolute disaster. Now, people could say, you don't know how colonization works, and they kept them stupid, and you have a whole generation that doesn't know anything, and never learned how to read or write. It's true. I'm not going to deny that's true. Talking about what's going to be the day after the war in Gaza. All the people they got trained there, they're all Hamas. No one's innocent. They've all been brainwashed. What are we going to put in there? Palestinian authorities any better? Also brainwashed. Yeah, to get a whole generation. To hear people talking, it's silly. They are talking, yeah, you got to re-educate the masses. How in the world are you going to re-educate the masses? How are you going to teach them not to hate Jews? And that their whole goal is not to kill Jews. How are you going to do that? That's how they're born and bred. So the parents can't fix them. They're gone. They're too far gone. They've indoctrinated their kids. And what are their kids? They grow up, they get married. What are they going to do? Same thing. How are you going to convince them? You're going to convince them to love Jews? Good luck. Not going to happen. Right? So you say that perpetuates itself. Okay? So that's like an no-win situation. That for the next 150, 200, 300 years, whatever it'll be. I mean, the sign will come before that, but whatever. They're never going to change. That's not going to change for them. It's not going to help. We're not talking about that. You're going to say, okay, all these people know is war. Right? They've been trained since they were kids and this and that. Okay. Even so, how long should it take I'm not saying it's going to take 5 years. It's going to take a lot longer than that. But you would think over time, eventually, things are going to get better. You would think, logically, according to nature. Now, people can give all kinds of factors involved. This happened to them, that happened to them, other things happened to them. Okay. But there's a limit, you would think. And you have a lot of people emigrated, let's say, to the States. Also a disaster. You can say, oh, they're put in ghettos. It's a perpetuating cycle. Okay. Some of them make it. Some of them. The vast majority, it's a disaster. The absolute disaster. You got Koreans made it in the States. You got other ethnic groups. They're the only ones that didn't. Some people say it's a racist thing to say. Other things happen to them. They got stuck. Whatever. There are a lot of factors involved. You're right. I'm not denying that. A lot of factors involved. But you would think, I'm just saying in theory, you would think, not just individuals can overcome it, but that like masses of people should be able to overcome it. They should want to do good in school, to get good jobs, go to university, be productive members of society. But with all the other factors, it's hindered that. True. And there are some that get out of it. Okay. But the vast majority don't. So you think the power of the community. It's the power of what's going on there. It's how how they're raised. Yeah, there are a lot of factors here. I'm not denying that. There are a lot of factors. Make it very difficult. Okay. But how long? How much time do you give it till you throw in the towel and say nothing's going to come out of them? In general. Does it make sense logically? Right? That's exactly the point. Does, how do we get on to this? Because we're looking at the Far East. In the Far East exponentially. There are more typhoons, tsunamis, and all that, more than any other place in the world. So you have to ask the question. You say, oh, it's climate. Global warming, it just affected them more. You can say, yeah, that's the climate there. Okay. But if God runs the world, God's in charge of nature, and these quote-unquote natural disasters occur in certain places over and over and over again, more than anywhere else, you got to ask the question, what's the difference over there than somewhere else? What is about what goes on in that place? So, one of my rabbis explained, pretty clear. This is the biggest place of idolatry. And if you read the Torah cover to cover, right, from Genesis, the book of Deuteronomy, what does it tell you? What does God hate? 2 things God hates more than anything else. Idolatry and immorality. Those 2 things are a common theme. You don't believe me? Read the book. It's a common theme over and over and over again. Many, many verses devoted to transgressions of idolatry, sorcery, and immorality. More than anything else. Yeah, it says don't steal. Right? Many laws about, causing damage. But these are things God hates. More than anything else. You see what happened by Bilam. Right? By Bilam, the evil non-Jewish prophet, tries to curse Jewish people, doesn't work, so how to get them to sin, even though he hates Midian. And they fought against Midian, Moab and Midian fought against each other and all this. They had a common enemy, the Jews. Right? So what do? Hire all these, immodest Midian women, get the Jews to sin. 24,000 Jews are killed. Till Pinchas comes on the scene. Right? And he stops. 24,000. One of the major things God hates besides idolatry. So at the end of the day, you got to see. If you see places where there's a lot of idolatry, you're going to see quote unquote natural disasters exponentially. You say, come on, every block's got a church. God hates idolatry in America. True. So you got a lot of things going on there also, not to this extent, though. Not to this extent. Yeah, you could say, wow, look at all the mass shootings going on the last number of years. Crazy. Shooting up schools. Someone came from a church, started shooting people other places. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Okay. Maybe that's God's punishment there. But in other parts of the world, no. God's taking revenge in other ways. Right? God's dealing with them in other ways. So again, for us in the Western world, not so in vogue. Involved in sorcery. Involved in idolatry, like, come on, a person really thinks this idol can do anything. Like, I just think, come on, so the whole thing is stupid, right? That whole idea of idolatry, certainly in the last hundreds of years, never had the power it did, like in the time of the temple and after. Never been that strong except in one area. Except in one area of the world. And that's the Far East. Again, not going to play down Christianity. It's also had its effect. We're not talking about that. So for us, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to understand. People want to tap in. Forget the demons don't have the same power they used to have. Right? We wouldn't recognize them. We saw them anyway. And we don't see them. But the rabbi saw them at the time of the temple. They hang out in certain places today. It's an irrelevant issue. What should someone take stock from all, been speaking about this for a number of weeks. What should you take stock from it? They existed. They don't have the same power. They were a spiritual force. We're going to see, as we mentioned before, that they have character traits like humans, character traits like angels. We don't have in contact with them. So I'm spending a lot of time going through it, but it's pretty much irrelevant in our daily life. Totally irrelevant in many ways. Yeah, still a good, it exists. The Ramchal speaks about it, Derech Hashem, it exists. But nothing like it used to. And the power that it once had doesn't have today. Not even close. So if you're talking to someone and they're like, la la land, oh, that must be a demon. We have no idea. No idea. We won't recognize a demon if he hit us in the face. But they don't have that kind of power anyway. They were reckless. The Gemara says. You came in contact with them, you got injured. That's pretty much what happened in a lot of cases. They got injured. That's why they hang out in deserts and other places where there's no people. Because when there are people around, they cause damage. In any case, says Rabbeinu Bachai, so people want to know the future. Wouldn't someone be world famous? They could predict the future. They knew the future. This is not something God wants you to tap into. Now, what's the problem? What's the issue? Right? What's the issue with knowing the future? What's so bad? Yeah, what's really so bad? What's the answer? If you knew the future, how much free will would you have? You wouldn't have very much free will. Because that's going to happen, this is going to happen, and you can't stop it. Seemingly, you can't stop it. So we saw before, we have two cases by Abraham and by Moses himself, that God tells them both the Jewish people are above the stars. The stars don't affect us. Even if you can read the stars. Right? You read this week's Parsha Shmos, beginning of the book of Exodus. Moses gives all kinds of excuses. He doesn't want to go save the Jewish people. They're not going to listen to me. God does a stick trick, right? Gives them a stick, touches it, turns into a snake, grabs the tail, turns back to a stick. Then Moses says, I don't speak well, I have a stutter, I have a lisp, right? Pharaoh's never going to take me seriously. God says, I can make anyone speak, right? So I can tell you, you can speak to Aaron. Aaron can speak okay, right? So the whole question over here. You can tell me it's his humility. He's so humble, he doesn't want to go. Maybe. The Torah calls him the humblest of all men. Okay? But why essentially doesn't he want to go? Because he looked up in the stars and he saw that there was an angel of God, angel of the Jewish people, and an angel of the Egyptians. Every nation has their guardian angel to plead for it in heaven for whatever their needs are. So Moses looks up to heaven, and Moses sees an angel of God, an angel of the Jewish people, and an angel of Egypt intertwined like this, like a double helix, like a DNA molecule. Anyone knows what a DNA molecule looks like? Yeah. So Moses is saying to God, how can I go? According to nature, there's no possible way. There's no possible way. Even if you tell me maybe, you play this scenario out 100 times. All these supercomputers. Yeah? You play this scenario. The Jewish people in Egypt. How many times the Jewish people escape according to all these supercomputers? None. You'll tell me maybe one day the underdog will win, right? In sports, you can have an underdog win. A team that's not supposed to win, they could win. On any given day, a team could win. So you think, maybe it's 1 in 100, 2 in 100, right? It could happen in theory, right? It could happen, couldn't it? In this case, Moses has a great claim. He tells God 100 times out of 100, it ain't about the underdog here. 100 times out of 100, the Jewish people don't get up. Impossible. Impossible. So what does God answer? God says, Mo, what are you worried about? Don't you know I created the heavens and the earth? Don't you know I can change nature? You're right. According to the stars, really, we shouldn't be looking at the stars, but he knew how to look at the stars properly. Right? God says, according to the stars, you're right. Jewish people never get out, according to nature. Now, one explanation, possible explanation, is that's exactly why God changes nature over here. The Torah says God is going to show, he's going to show the Egyptians his power, his might. Also says he's going to show the Jewish people. The whole question of the plagues are for. Are they just for the sake of the Jewish people? Are they for the sake of the Egyptians? Regardless, God does a lot of things that go against nature. So one of the reasons, possible reasons, is because God said, I'm going to take them out above nature because you're right, according to nature, it's never going to happen. That's one example. Second example is by Abraham. Right? God says to Abraham, look at the stars. The stars are so numerous you can't count them, so too your progeny. You'll never be able to count. Now, kind of interesting. If you're not going to be able to count them, then we should be like 150 billion people. We're only, 14 and a half, 15 million people. Or something like that. So it doesn't necessarily mean by quantity, it means by quality, that we've had an effect on the whole world, even if we're 1/1000th of the world's population. But again, Abraham looks at the stars and says, I can't have children. It's impossible. According to nature, it's impossible. Right? God says, you're right. According to nature, it's impossible. I don't go according to nature. I can change your wife, I can change you, and you have a natural child. Pretty miraculous. He's 100, she's 90, she's 90. right? According to nature, impossible. So what does God do? He changes their names. Sarai adds a hey, takes out the yud, and Avram becomes Avram becomes Abraham. Avram. It's going to have God's name here. Yud K is half of God's name. So God says, you're right. According to nature, you're not going to have children. Right? So what does he do? He changes the nature. You're right. Avram will not have kids. Abraham will. Sarai will not have kids. Sarah will. Change their nature. So even if there's a decree, there's a block up in heaven, it doesn't mean it can't change. Now, we mentioned last week the way the zodiac is set up. Person's born under certain constellations, like one of the friends of Job, right? One of the friends of Job says, maybe it's your bad luck. That's your constellation you were born under, so you can't change it. So the end of the Gemara in Shabbos says, by Jews, even if they're born under certain stars or certain constellations, whatever it may be, that have a very strong very strong influence, spiritual influence, doesn't mean they can't change it. They'll have to work really hard to change it. Doesn't mean they can't. Non-Jews may be stuck. They may be stuck. This is decree, this is decree. Maybe they can't change it at all. Jews at least have the ability, because based on their soul level, they should be able to change it only if Toysville over there says, only if they work extremely hard. They have to work like a hunt, as they would say in South Africa, like a dog. Got to work really, really strong to fix it. But a person can say the same thing. It's not fair. I'm born this way, under this, that. We're affected. We can't change. Not true. We have the ability to change. Is the ability to change going to be easy? Oh, no. You got to fight for it. You got to work very hard. Right? You got to work very hard over here. But the first point the Rabbeinu Bachai says is the fact that this was powerful. This caused the Jewish people to run after. Now, today we'd say that's illogical. These things don't have power. So we understand the mistake they made. We said at the beginning. Pharaoh and others thought God's too lofty, he's too powerful. What do they want to deal with this world? He's too busy, working on climate control, taking care of black holes. So he has other spiritual forces to deal with this stuff. No. They don't have independent power. They don't have independent free will. But even these other things, when it comes to sorcery and all that, God does not want you to tap into it. It could literally kill you. These are forces you don't want to mess with. Now, there have been stories. There have been stories bringing up souls. And people, people getting scared out of their wits. Some guy tells a story, a soldier playing with the Ouija board, and the soul says, they try and bring up the soul, whatever. And the soul's like, it causes me a lot of pain. It's going to be, you're going to get serious repercussions. They're like, they didn't really take it so seriously. I think it was a soldier, goes back home, and, opens the door, unlocks the door. Whole place is ransacked. He's telling the story. I heard the story from him. The whole place, his whole apartment, his house, whatever it was, totally ransacked. No broken windows. No forced way of entry. Anywhere. Check the whole house. How did someone get in and ransack this place? Say it was an inside job. You say, someone broke in. Someone had a key, whatever. No rational explanation. There are stories that, souls in a lot of pain and, took a person, just threw him. Picked him up and threw him. These are eyewitness accounts. We're not telling ghost stories here. Telling from the people themselves. So these are things you don't want to mess with. God created these forces, again, for his own purpose. The Ramchal does not go into detail in Derech Hashem of why. He says what the forces are, how the heavenly court works, how things work in this world, how mitzvahs get judged or transgressions get judged, why righteous people suffer, very good. But beyond that, again, a lot of this is very much steeped in Kabbalah. But beyond that, he's just giving you the Aleph base. He's not telling you more than that. He's telling you enough for you to get an idea, of how the heavenly court works, how the other things work, and what these forces are. Okay? That's the only thing we should take out of it. What goes on today, this, that, it's really irrelevant. I mean, I just think it's an interesting topic, but, practically speaking, we don't see these things. We don't come in contact with them. They don't have the same power. But he is telling you, though. He is telling you that this idea of sorcery, that people, tapped in time, time of Egypt, that was a very powerful thing. In certain places. Now, again, I'm adding this. He doesn't say this. I mean, he's going to say it later, actually. He's going to say it later. But the idea is, in other places, people run after it. It's got a stronger, lasting power than, let's say, in the Western world. Because people get caught up. He said people got caught up in Egypt. This wisdom. And they were drawn after it. Now, we can't imagine that. Can't imagine. Like we said before, these other New Age type of things, like Wicca and other things, they're not in vogue. They are definitely not in vogue. Most people are not tapping into them. The main religions are still the main religions. Even if they're idolaters or whatever. Right? Certainly in the Western world. Outside the Western world, different issue. These other places in the world's got power. They're tapping into this power, not saying it's good. Which makes the question stronger in a certain sense. So why put it out there? Why allow people to mess things up and potentially kill themselves? Playing with this stuff. Again, we have free will. Rabbi would say, Abraham gave it to the children of Keturah. He said, here, take this gift, go very far away. They'll never mix with the Jewish people. They'll never have any no one is going to think they're Jews. And they'll go so far off, right? They'll never have any contact with Jews, be part of the Jewish people. Right? Again, it's still hard to understand. Even with that, it's still hard to understand. Yeah, there's a question here. Let me just deal with it. Second here. Somebody asks, no, I'm allowed to address God by his name. Why not? How else are you going to address him? How else would you address him? Right? You're going to address him as Hashem, no? I mean, it's a 4-letter name. If you'd be allowed to make blessings, that's how you would address it. Right? There are blessings no idols can make. So if you're going to say the blessing, you say right. Right? You can say what God said. Right? That's not an issue. Should you keep saying his name over and over different things? No. I wouldn't go that far. Whatever applies. Right? Whatever it applies. Meaning, if they have to say a blessing or whatever it may be, they could use his name. Right? For sure they could use his name. Otherwise, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't tell them to do it all the time, by any stretch. No question. But when the time comes, they're allowed to. Right? Seem they're allowed to. Yeah. Any other questions here? All right, I'm gonna go a little further here. So Rabbeinu Bachai continues. Rabbeinu Bachai said, he said they're also called shadim, also called demons. Why are they called demons? Because they dwell in places that are empty places. Right? Play on the words, right? Shadim from the word shadut. The word shadut means like an empty place, like a desert. Right? Or, places where there's no people. Right? There's nobody there. Right? Empty places. But then he says, brings down from the Ramban. We went through this Ramban, I think. Right? Right, we went to this Ramban in this verse, but he's got a number of things that he adds on here, or changes a little bit. So he says, where does the demon come from? Right, in general. He says there are four aspects of the world. Four common elements. Right? You got wind, you got fire, you got water, and you got earth. You got dust. So they come from two of the easier ones, lighter ones, i.e., fire and wind. Right? Even though they have a body, so it's not like they're eating things that are filling them up that like we would, per se. Right? We'll see. So one thing he says, since they come from these elements, it's much easier for them to fly around. Why? Much lighter. Right? If you're much lighter, it's easier. Flap around, fly around. One of the things they have in common with angels. So even though that's how they're made up in general, he says they're a hybrid of the four elements of the world. So he says, when God created the world, remember, he created the heaven and the earth. He created everything in heaven also, even spiritual force. So he created them from the two lighter or easier four elements of this world. But he created them with a body, whatever, similar body, I guess, to a human. That it's a body in the sense that we can see it's a body. In other words, the question would be, someone asked, well, would we ever recognize one as being a demon? Today, no. But back in the day, when they, came more in contact, let's say, or they came somewhat contact, they could be recognized with the body. Right? That's one thing. A person could sense them. They can sense them because they have a body. But he says there's a difference, though. What's the difference? He says they have a thinner body that, in general, we don't sense. Right? In other words, it's a certain type of body where it's thinner and we don't see it as like a regular body. We don't necessarily sense it. But they can change. They can, using the language over there, they can make themselves appear, let's say, they have that form. Right? It seems like they have this form people can see. But what's the problem? What's the problem? Rabbeinu Bachai says it's a guf ruchani. It's a body, some sort of body, but it's a guf ruchani, spiritual body. So in one sense, we don't necessarily sense it. On the other hand, it's a body, some sort of body. Right? Because it's half spiritual, half physical. You know, it's got certain character traits. Like angels, certain character traits. Like humans, which we're going to see. Right? So it's got fundamental elements of what? Of spirituality. But didn't we say they come from the four elements of the earth? Talking to tell me they're really spiritual in some sort of physical body or some sort of spiritual body, whatever it is. He says they're a hybrid. They're a hybrid of spiritual aspects like angels and physical aspects like humans. So one of the things that they do that is similar to humans is they die. Now, when a demon dies, what happens? You have a separation of the spiritual side with the physical body, whatever that body is. And that's why the Gemara says in Chagiga 16a, it says there are 6 things they say about demons. 3 like angels, they have wings, they fly around like angels, they know the future. They know the future like angels. So then the Gemara asks, oh, you really think they know the future? Even angels don't know the future. Right? They only know what they hear. They only know what they hear that God says or God emanates, whatever it is, they hear. The angels hear things. So what they hear, they can say. Or what they know. Right? But the Gemara asks, oh, really? You really think they know the future? They don't know the future. Rather, he says they hear. They hear things. They hear things what we call me'acharei apargud, from behind the tapestry up there. Right? It's the barrier separates between the place where God is. Rashi brings us over there in Brachos 18b. Right? In other words, in that place where God is, so they hear certain things. That means they know the future? Doesn't mean they know the future. They hear things. They hear things, so certain things they hear. Okay. So in that sense, they hear things like angels. Because they fly around. Right? Again, they got lighter bodies. Easier to glide, I guess. They fly around, they hear things. Just like angels hear things. Oh, you want to tell me they really know the future? No. They don't know the future. They don't know the future. But comes along, the Rabbeinu Bachai says, what's going on here? What's this whole thing going on here? He says they hang out and they can dwell and fly around, in space. And they can hear things from who? From Sari Hamazalas. What are the Sari Hamazalas? We said, there's a zodiac. And these Mazalas have spiritual influence. Right? The way the constellations are set up and all that. They have some sort of, spiritual influence over here. And they hear from them. Since they're flying up in that area anyway, they can hear maybe the stars chirping away, saying whatever they heard or whatever. Or planets or who knows what. So, says Rabbeinu Bachai, okay, I can tell you like this. If I know by birds fly around, and they know the future, and they tell each other, they chirp, we don't understand what they say, but they're like chirping away. Right? How do they hear? Again, they're up there, they're flying up there. So they hear things that come out. right? And you have birds. That people know the language of the birds. Or people know how to do incantations and understand what the birds say, let's say. So all the more so by demons. It's possible for them to understand, right, from these mazals, that they can also hear certain things, just like birds. They hear things going on in the upper spheres, and they chirp away one to another, right? So too, these demons can hear things also, right? They can also hear things. But what do they know? Right? What do they know over here? Says Rabbeinu Chaim, the only thing they know is something that is imminent. Something that's going to happen in the near future. They don't know things, let's say, they don't know things months in advance. They don't know things weeks in advance. They don't even know things days in advance. They know things like very close to it happening. Right? They're not going to know things, that's going to happen in 2 weeks' time. Then the Rebbeinu Bachai says, there are 3 things. They have character traits like people. They eat and drink like people. They procreate like people. And they die like people. Those are 3 character traits the Gemara says that a demon has in common with people. Now, first thing is, right, again, what would be the obvious question? The obvious question would be, what do you mean? What do you mean they eat and they drink? They eat and they drink like humans? Right? So Rabbeinu Bachai says no. Doesn't mean they ate the same food we do. Because where do we come from? We come from the 4 elements of the world. We come from a much thicker body, so to speak. So you need thicker food to sustain the body, to sustain our body. But by demons, they have a spiritual body. I can't tell you what that means. Probably have to kill everybody before I explain it. Right? What does that mean, a spiritual body? I don't know. Need a Kabbalist to explain this. Right? But they have some sort of body in spiritual terms. That's thin. That's very thin. Yeah, it doesn't mean, they're like sticks, whatever, but like they're very thin. So the food that they eat cannot be thick, kill them, essentially. You can only eat things that are thin for that body. And where does that come from? Well, again, it comes from their basic elements also. It comes from fire. Right? It comes from water. It comes from the, the dampness of water, so to speak. So whatever, he talks about the fact that, what's going on really inside of them, these elements, how they work together, etc. Not really so relevant to us in that sense. There's one other point I wanted to see here. He says because of their elements, right? One of them we said is water. So he said that's the idea that what do people do? People bring incense to them. Why? Because when they light something and it smokes, right, it's got a certain texture. The smoke has a certain texture. Right? It's got a certain texture. And that's the food for them. And that's how they survive. Right? Again, not the same as us. But But then he says, okay, so however they live, however, they're taking this quote unquote, this food to sustain them. They get benefit from it. And they attach themselves to humans, meaning, I guess they have contact with us, even though, it's very rare, even time in the Talmud. And they tell us the future. We can tap into them if we knew how. We can tap into them and find out what's going to happen in the future. Says the Rabbeinu Bachai, what's that called? What's this whole thing called, doing all this? He says it's a wisdom that's called negromancia. What does it sound like? Necromancy. Right? So it's a hybrid of a few words. One word from the first part of it means it's like, it's part water. And the other means that it's like, it's incense that sorcerers use. It's like the incense that satisfies these demons. That's one explanation. Another explanation is, that he says is it's like black magic. That's what it sounds like. Yeah, that these people, these heretics, bring this incense, to their gods or to their beings or whatever, which is also good for demons. He calls it necromancy. And then he says, okay, what happens at the end? They die. Right? They also die like humans. So he says, just like by a person, when they die, it's a separation of the four elements. Again, water, earth, fire, and wind. So too, by demons. In other words, when they die, what happens? These elements also, the elements separate from themselves. And he dies. Right? This demon dies. They talk about how they can fly so easily, how they can know the future like birds. So again, because they can fly so easily, they hear things and whatever. Right? So here, it's a little bit different. Not exactly the same as the Ramban. He adds a few things here. Right? Changes a few things here from, I think goes a little more depth than what the Ramban here says. But let's not get carried away. Right? Let's not get carried away. This is something that's, okay, something we hear. We understand the spiritual force, but let's keep in mind, right? Let's keep in mind one thing, right? Without getting lost in any parables here, right? The idea is that there are spiritual forces. There are spiritual forces in the world. Now, the Ramchal in Derech Hashem goes to great detail, or it goes to some detail. Exactly, we live in this there's a transcendental world. Meaning, person does something in this world. They make a blessing. Yeah? They make a blessing. Now, at that split second they make the blessing, that's going to have power in the upper world. God's going to look at it, judge at it, say, send his messengers, do whatever with this blessing, and then person makes the blessing, it has ramifications in this world. Person made a halfway decent blessing, let's say, makes the blessing over an apple, Bray Priya Eitz, no Kabbalistic intention. It's got the ability to have spiritual ramifications and physical ramifications. Because anyone does a mitzvah, gores mitzvah, what does the mitzvah do? Makes it stronger. draws us closer. Yeah. Even a person doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, does not mean that the mitzvah does not have power. The mitzvah has power. Whatever we do draws us close. Whatever we don't do or do negatively, it's like taking a step backwards or 2 steps backwards. So a person doesn't necessarily sense it. There's sometimes I would say, when a person, does the right thing, they help Granny cross the street, they give charity, right? They do something positive. Something like that affects, they feel good. They go volunteer, even better. They go volunteer for an organization. They wrap up care packages for needy people, right? Let's say. They feel good about what they do. They're in the soup kitchen handing out food, people who need. Whatever the mitzvah is, there are things that we do that make us feel good. It's not feeling good in the sense it's, I feel I'm better than anyone else. And I'm feeling I'm superior because I just helped Granny cross the street. You feel good. Why do you feel good? You feel good because you see you're helping someone else. You're giving of yourself. You don't have to do that. You let someone else do it. Okay? But it makes you feel good inside. Right? In my language, makes you feel a little bit loopy. Why loopy? I don't know, I like that word. Makes you feel a little bit loopy. Yeah? Because you're feeling you're part of creation here. You're tapping into the divine. Just like God has compassion for others, we also have compassion. Should have compassion. We should also want to help others, whatever we can do, within reason. That's huge. It's a huge thing. It makes us feel good because, we believe in the cause. We're helping others. Now, it could be deceptive. There are people who think they're doing the right thing and they're doing totally the wrong thing. Okay, I'm not talking about that. Right? That's a whole other discussion. Right? But essentially, you're doing the right thing because you're doing the right thing. You're doing it for you're not doing it for recompense. You're not going to pay back for it. You're not doing it, for any accolades. Why are you doing it? Because you believe it's the right thing to do. It makes you feel good helping others. That's what mitzvahs do. Now, sometimes we see it more. Person does that, they feel it more. Person, let's say on the holiday of Sukkot, they're shaking their lulav like this, like this and whatever. They feel like $1 million afterwards. I guess if you really know what you're doing, maybe. But for most people, even when we understand to a certain level, okay, God says you got to do it. God says, shut up and eat the matzah. You got to eat the matzah. You got to eat a lot of it. You think, wow, what a covenant. Where do I join? Where do I sign up? It's beautiful. Get into, your stomach's killing you for like 3 days. But whatever we do, if it's positive and we're doing the right thing, draws us closer to the source. That's what we're trying to do. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Draw ourselves closer to the source. To be medabek l'Hashem. To attach ourselves, like devek, the word medabek has the same root as devek, daled beis kuf, which means what? To attach. Really means, in modern Hebrew, it means glue. Yeah, but it means to attach ourselves. We want to attach ourselves to the divine. God's not, physical or spiritual. So hard to tap in, so to speak, but he gave us a book. He gave us the ability to do so. And he says when you do the right thing, your soul gets elevated exponentially. You do the wrong thing, just the opposite. So it's a constant battle we mentioned many times. It's always a constant battle between body and soul. Very good. But when I do the right thing, there are times, I'm not going to say it happens all the time. There are times when we feel a little bit loopy and we feel good about what we've done. We feel we've helped others. We've given of ourselves without thinking we're going to get anything back from it. See, greatest mitzvah in that sense. What we saw, at the end of last week's parsha, where Yaakov dies. Yaakov dies and he makes Yosef swear he's not going to bury him in Egypt. He's going to take him to, where grandparents, father, his grandparents are buried, in Martha Machpelah, right, in Hebron, right, in the cave of the patriarchs. When a person dies and you're helping with, all kinds of things, you're not getting anything back. This dead person ain't giving you anything. I'm not even talking about inheritance or whatever. In general, he's not going to reciprocate. He's not going to say, oh, thank you very much. So glad you helped me over here. He's dead or she's dead. So what am I getting from it? So that's why we call it a chesed shel emes. It's an act of loving kindness and truth. Why truth? Why do we call it an act of loving kindness and truth? In general. Right? We call it that for one very simple reason. Because dead people can't repay you back. They can't give you anything. Doesn't matter, again, does not matter if you inherit from them or not. It's irrelevant. What you're helping with them and and setting up, the burial and other things, whatever you're doing to help in this process, you're not getting rewarded whatsoever from the person. Right? That person said he ain't standing up giving you, here's $100, here's $1,000, here's, whatever, I'm helping you. I want to thank you for helping me. No. They're going to be flat in their back and they ain't getting up. Maybe by resurrection, but they ain't getting up now. So you get no recompense. You don't get anything from it. You get the mitzvah that you did. That's what you get. You don't get anything else. That's why that mitzvah itself is called the chesed shel emes. It's absolute truth. Because you don't get anything from it. There's no benefit. There's absolutely zero benefit here. And the Mishnah Pirkei Avos said, this is the highest level. Person should serve God even if he's not going to get reward. But we know in the future we'll get reward for the mitzvahs we've done. The highest level is to serve him even if that's not the case. And we wouldn't get reward. Because we believe it's the right thing to do. Someone once asked me, says, according to me, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. Right? They said to me, okay, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? You kept all these antiquated laws. You live this austere life, this difficult life, etc. What happens after you die? Nothing happens. But first of all, I don't think that's going to happen. But let's say it would. Let's say we did everything. We kept Torah mitzvahs to the best of our ability. And the reality is, it was all a charade. The whole thing was false. God forbid. Yeah, the whole thing was nothing. We didn't need to do any of this. We could have eaten shrimp. Could have done all kinds of other fun things. No. Right? If I answered, even if that would be the case, let's say I would agree. I said, I would still tell you, this is 100% the best way to live your life. Right? Either as a Jew or either as a Noahide. Or if someone converts, doesn't really matter. This is the best moral way to live your life. Even if there would be no reward. Because we've spoken before. Why did God have to give you a hoodsie? He doesn't. Why should he give you a reward? Right? That hoodsie, a Dixie cup made out of, chocolate vanilla ice cream. Wooden spoon made by Hoods, company called Hoods. So in Boston, we used to call it a hoodsie. So the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, you're going to say you're going to do a lot of Torah. Yeah, that's what you're created to do. So why are you going to think you're so great? Why are you going to have gaiva? Why are you going to be conceited? So Rabbeinu Bachai says an amazing thing, which we mentioned many times. Why should a person get reward in the first place? God is telling you, I created you to do this. If you're a Jew. If you're a non-Jew, you got other things to do. Fine. This is what you're created to do. You want a hoodsie? Yeah, I want a hoodsie. What do you mean you want a hoodsie? This is what you're created to do. Comes on the Rabbeinu Bachai in the Chovos HaLevavos. He's the one who wrote the Chovos HaLevavos. He said, you know why I get reward? The only reason you get reward, says the Chovos HaLevavos over there, is because what? It's only because God did it as a chesed. God did it as an act of loving kindness. Did God have to give you a hoodsie? He had to give you a reward? No. He created you. He put you in this world. He gave you food. He gave you shelter. He takes care of your needs. And you want a hoodsie? You deserve reward? Why do you deserve reward? You don't deserve nothing. None of us deserve anything. He gives us life. He gives us everything. We deserve reward? Says the Rabbeinu Bachai over there in the Chovos HaLevavos. He gives a reward only for one thing. Only for one reason. The only reason he gives you a reward is because it's a chesed. That's it. If it wouldn't be the fact that it would be a chesed, you wouldn't deserve. You'd be an ingrate. I'm only going to do it if I'm going to get reward. You know, I heard someone say many years ago, holding nowhere in the world at that time. Person said, yeah, go back and ask your rabbis. The only reason you do it is because you're going to get a portion of the world to come. But it's not true. Because even if we wouldn't get a portion of the world to come, he'd still do it. You still have an obligation. It's an incentive. You know, Haba makes sense. The next world makes sense. This world cannot be the ultimate, even if the Torah doesn't speak about the next world directly. It all doesn't matter. You know, you're going to say, you're going to have a lot of faith and, you know, that it exists and this and that. But it doesn't make sense logically. There shouldn't be something else. Because if a person is born in a messed up body, if a person is born into even better, a messed up family, physically, psychologically, whatever, yeah, you're going to say, my bad luck. What Amalek would say, no supernatural, nothing happens. You know, everything's just by chance. So if everything's just by chance, you know, what's the point? So I heard someone say, very interesting, that the best-selling book we understand of all time is the Torah, the Bible. And you want to know what the second best-selling book is? That's what someone said. I'm incredulous. I mean, I don't know to verify, but this is what, you know, I'll take what they said at face value. The second best-selling book of all time is by Harold Kushner, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Yeah, okay, I understand it's the best, you know, it was a New York Times bestseller, okay. Second best-selling book? Mind-boggling. I don't encourage anyone to read it. You know, he's an absolute heretic. I don't think there's any question about it. But he wrote this book. He had a son, you know, that died of a RAS, I think it's called. I think it's also called progeria, but rapid aging syndrome, where basically a person's a 10-year-old in the body of an 80-year-old. And basically his conclusion was like, you know, I checked out my actions, my wife's actions, this, that, you know, and he came to the conclusion that we're pretty good people, must be, you know, stuff happens, we're not in control. Now, okay, what do you do at the end of the book of Job? Where God chastises him to no end, and think, oh, you know, could you play with this Leviathan? He'd kill you just by his breath. You know, could you do to these birds that I save and they shouldn't be, you know, their species should discontinue? No. Can you do this? No. Can you do this? No. So God says to Job to shut your mouth. Just shut your big mouth. You don't have any idea what goes on here. You have no idea how I control the world. You have no idea. So why are you talking? Now, family went through a terrible ordeal. I don't think there's any question. No one should go through such a thing. Child like that and the suffering it goes through. But why was it the second best-selling book of all time? Very simple. Because it took the responsibility of us away. It means stuff happens, you're not in control. God's not in control. Stuff happens. So he made everybody feel good. Again, do we know why these things happen? No. You can say it's reincarnation, this, that. Okay, but we don't know. We don't know why these things happen. Children are born sick, they're mentally challenged, whatever it may be. Because it's not punishment for them. For the child, for the soul maybe, not for the child. Because they're not punishable yet. Not to the age of 13 or the age of 20. So it can't be, they're punished. So we don't know why. But you can't make that conclusion either. That's heresy. That's saying God's not in control. That means we're not so bad. It must mean, okay, it's your bad luck. But it doesn't mean you're bad. Doesn't mean you have to take responsibility for your actions. That's why it was the bestseller. Because he took responsibility away from everybody. He told people you're okay. No matter what you do, you're okay. And this just never should happen, but it happens. He basically takes God out of the picture. And he makes people feel good. He makes them feel good without taking any responsibility in their lives. Now again, we just said we don't know how these things happen. We don't know why they happen. Nothing happens for no reason. So if you understand reincarnation a little bit, it makes more sense. But again, that's quarter of a consolation, a third of a consolation. Even if okay, the soul had to come back and suffer and go through this and go through that, and it's a much better place. It got fixed up. Yeah, you could hear it intellectually. Putting it in your heart spiritually is a much harder thing to do. Much, much harder thing to do. But he wrote a book and he made everybody feel good about their own lives without having ever to take responsibility. That's why it's a bestseller. Who wants to read a book about, we have to be careful what we do. We have to be careful what we see. We could pay, God could pay us back in a lot of different ways and, in negative ways and different things. And yeah, a lot of things that we have to take responsibility for. Read any Musar book. Path of the Just, Read the Gate to Repentance, The Ways of the Righteous. Yeah, they make you feel like a piece of dirt because we are responsible for what we do. In many ways, we don't even see the ramifications and the repercussions. We can't even imagine how far the repercussions go. He's not telling you that. He's making you feel good. He's telling you don't take responsibility for anything because stuff happens. We're not in control. And God's not in control. It's your bad luck. That's why it's a bestseller. Makes you feel so good. It's not my fault. Not anybody's fault. This is what I had to deal with. And my son had to be, that's what he had to go through. So he doesn't have an answer. I mean, he does. He takes God right out of the picture. But again, you can't judge somebody unless you've been in their shoes. And it's a horrible thing. I don't think there's any question. But he came to the wrong conclusion. Seriously wrong conclusion. Yeah. Heresy. Total heresy. I understand why he says it. Doesn't make it right. But he made everybody feel so good. That's just your bad luck. It's not your fault. It's like saying nothing we do is our fault. And anything that happens to us, it's not our fault. Person wakes up and look both ways, cross the street. All of a sudden, someone comes barreling down the road, flattens them like a pancake. Now they become paraplegic. There's a story. Someone married someone who was in a wheelchair. This woman, got all her faculties, everything else, got hit by a drunk driver. Became paraplegic, very young. Person married her, very happy. A number of kids. Yeah. So you can think, why her? Why'd she have to get hit by a drunk driver? I remember, I was in middle school, high school. They had this group, MADS, right? Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. There's a problem. No one should ever drive under the influence, no question. People get seriously injured and killed. Definitely more, a lot of people died drunk driving. No question. So, they had this group. I was never part of it, but, trying to educate people, you never drink under the influence. This is horrific, especially amongst young adults. Want to drive 16 and a half, 17. They go to these parties, they drink, that's what they do, among other things. Yeah, and get behind the wheel. Now you're going to be insane to get behind the wheel. Doesn't matter where you're going, how close it is, or whatever. You're in trouble. Yeah, some people say I drive better when I drink. Yeah. Good luck. I mean, how many accidents, every year from drunk driving? Hundreds, thousands. People die. People die. So at the end of the day, at the end of the day, someone does that. God forbid someone doesn't. They had too much to drink, get behind the wheel, manslaughter. But you can't bring that person back. Could be a young adult, could be a child. Yeah. They don't have the same reflexes. They flatten someone like a pancake. The person died. Terrific. People say, people ask the question, they'll seriously ask the question. Life's not fair. This should never happen. In a perfect world, you're right, it shouldn't happen. But see, do we understand? There's a story here many years ago. A 3-year-old fell into a manhole. Died. Someone, after seeing the baby fall in, jumped in to try and save the baby. That person, I think they're still in a coma after all these years. Either in a coma or they're dead. One or the other. One or the other. Now, this person had the right intention. Sees the child fall into a manhole, goes in to save him. Very good. Yeah, that manhole is toxic gas. Now, whether he knew about it, he didn't know about it, instinct told him to jump in. Okay. Good Samaritan. Yeah. Trying to save, a child's life. Okay. How can you jump in and not know? I can just jump in, yeah, he has the right intention. Not going to say not. Has the right intention, all the right intention. Not that he wants to play hero. He's got the right intention. So you're going to say, that's how God pays him back? He goes in to save a child's life, and he stays a cripple his whole life. All right? They have to drag him out. He's unconscious, never regains consciousness. Right? There are a lot of things you could ask on this topic. Now, again, if I were playing God, put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, and this person came to me and said, "Why, God, why'd you do this?" What would I answer? What would my What would the simple answer be? Did I tell you to jump into a manhole that's got toxic gas? I didn't tell you to jump in. You wanted to play the hero. You want to save the person's life, even for the sake of heaven. Very good. You're not allowed to put your life in danger. You didn't have any extra lives to protect you. I took you. Same thing, a football player, I mentioned the story before. Jumps in to save people drowning. He drowns. He wasn't a good swimmer. I think one of them, 2 out of 3, I think, or 2 out of 3, I think, survived. 2 of them drowned. You can't jump in if you don't know how to swim. Especially if you don't know how to save people. At the camp, my last year at camp, I took junior life saving when I was 15. You're in full clothing. You got to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, they will drown you. They will drown you to save themselves. So you have to know how to approach them, what to do. And if you don't know what to do, they could drown you. This guy gets up to heaven. Again, comes in front of me. I'm playing God here, right? I'll be the judge and the jury, for better or for worse. Guy comes in front of me. He says, God, why didn't you save me? I said, let's play this video again. You saw them drowning. You didn't know what to do. You jumped in. Now, right before you jump in, you had a thought in your mind, I don't really know how to swim that well. But you jumped in anyway. He said, yeah, but it was adrenaline. I had all this adrenaline. I wanted to save them. God says, obviously you didn't listen to Kaufman's classes. Don't you know what the 614th commandment is? Don't be a moron. I told you. Or 615 commandments, don't be stupid. You just intertwine them. I didn't tell you to jump in. You don't know how to swim. You're not a good swimmer. If they're going to drown, they're going to drown. Who said you have to try and save them? Be the hero. You don't know how to swim. You don't jump in if you don't know how to swim. You can't put your life in danger. They'll say, why didn't you save me? I said, because you didn't have anything to save for. You didn't have any extra lives to protect you. You didn't have Torah to protect you. You didn't have mitzvahs to protect you. That was it. That was your time to go. Sounds pretty cruel. What's the point here? What we see, we don't understand. Give another example. Moshe Rabbeinu. He sees that the Egyptians are using Jewish babies as mortar. So he wants to save, one of the babies, not to be made part of a wall. God says, don't do it. He said, what could be wrong saving a baby? That baby turned out to be one of the most wicked kings in the history of the Jewish people. God didn't tell him that. God said, don't do it. It's a bad idea. He didn't tell him why. What is it? What could be bad? What could be bad? Child being made into mortar, that's bad. He saves the child. That child became one of the worst kings in the history of the Jewish people. Bottom line, what we see, we don't see. Maybe once in a blue moon, God will throw us a bone, proverbial bone. And maybe we'll see, we'll understand, I had to go through this or go through that. Most times, not even a clue. Not even a clue. It's an upside down world. Very upside down world. Can't make heads or tails of it. I think people sometimes overthink things. They'll think, I have to go through this, and I went through that, and I went through the other thing. We don't know why. Person can be paid back for something they did a month ago, 2 months ago. God said, okay, I'm paying you back now. Why? I can't answer. Nothing in general is direct. I saw a few videos recently. There's a video going around that went viral of someone in parliament in Turkey. And this didn't happen. It happened a couple of years ago. Didn't happen recently. Blaspheming against the Israelis, and saying how they'll deserve to die, and this and that. And on the spot, he had a heart attack. Right? And a few days later, he died. This was in Pakistan also, and if God doesn't believe me, all these things against the Jews, let the earth let the earth, come up and suck me in. And that's exactly what happened. 2 instances, Now you can say it's pretty direct. Blaspheming against God, blaspheming against the Jewish people. And this is exactly what happened. That could have happened because they deserved other things that happened well before. It's just a very interesting coincidence that happened right then. Right when they said it. Because it very rarely happens like that. You don't see something direct. Because if you see something direct all the time, we wouldn't have free will. But it's a very interesting coincidence, right? It's a similar thing what happens, on October 7th by this festival. You say there was a Buddha there, other things going on. So that was the cause. First of all, nobody knows what the cause was. Second of all, this was decreed by Rosh Hashanah. That decree was already made by Rosh Hashanah. Now, what they did on October 7th, did that help? Oh, no. That didn't help. But to say that's the cause, nobody knows. Rebbe said that. Other great people said nobody knows. What they didn't help. Desecration of Shabbos in Israel doesn't help. Yeah. Rosh Hashanah and the judicial reform and all that didn't help. Now, are those the reasons? Could be some of them. We can't pinpoint what the reason is. Nobody knows. What they didn't help. But you see, a lot of people died in a horrific way. That was serious payback. Serious payback. Mutilation, burning, beheaded, all kinds of things. Yeah. But people forget, there are decrees made on Rosh Hashanah. That decree wasn't just made that day. So everyone can ask, but it seems pretty direct. It's death penalty, stoning, yeah, but not everyone got killed in impact. Then we got people that got burnt, mutilated in other ways. I think it's, immorality, they got burned, divine punishment for that, for corporal punishment. Yeah, we don't know. Nobody knows. But that decree was already made. So therefore, this is what happens after the fact. But the decree was already made. Single biggest slaughter of Jews, right? I heard since, what do you call it, 6-Day War? Some were saying since the Holocaust, but I heard someone say 6-Day War had that. He has many killed during that time. I haven't seen that many Jews killed since. It's a horrific thing. I don't think there's any question about it. But nobody can say it happened because of this or that or the other thing. Other factors don't help. Let's make clear. They don't help. Right? It's just like my Rebbe would say, the rabbis gave different reasons for the mitzvahs. But who's to say it's the reason? Because even if there's something that doesn't apply today, some rabbis would say you don't have to do it. Right? If the reason given doesn't apply. Others would say just because the reason doesn't apply, doesn't mean we don't do it. Doesn't mean it's the reason. That's the point. Doesn't mean it's the reason. So a lot of things, we see, we don't have any clue. The Gemara in Pesachim says, we live in an upside down world. Totally upside down world. I think if God revealed himself or opened our eyes, let's say better, opened our eyes for like a few seconds, just to get a little bit in his brain of why things are going on, we'd be floored. We'd be floored. Because what we see, we don't understand. Like one of my rabbis told me, very much steeped in Kabbalah. There's a book called Sefer Gilgulin, right? Literally a book of reincarnation. And it goes through a who's who from the beginning of time. Who's reincarnated into who. So one of my rabbis told me, he said, listen, you ever read that book, you have to have a lot of fear of heaven. You have to have a tremendous amount of fear of heaven. Because when you see what's going on behind the scenes, and who's fighting against who, and who's doing what to fix this up or fix that up, and you'll see it's like it's mind-boggling. That's why you have to have a lot of fear of heaven. Otherwise, face value, you're going to say it's crazy. It's crazy how the world works. This one dies, you're going to put him in another body, and he's going to fight against this. What you're looking at, you don't see. You don't understand. Right? It's just like learning Tanakh in many ways. Person learns Tanakh, you don't have the proper perspective. You're not looking at the commentaries. A lot of times you'll see some things in Tanakh seem to contradict the Torah. So Tanakh is very rich also. Very, very rich, in learning, but you got to see what's really going on. That's why if you don't have proper perspective, that's why you mess things up. Exactly why, the Christians got, so many things wrong. Because I'm looking at it from the right perspective, obviously. But even so, when you see what's going on and who's doing what, and, a little bit deeper, what's really going on, it's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. Got to have fear of heaven going through it also. There's punishment for this, there's punishment for that, this is what's going on. You can't look at things at face value. The whole book of Genesis like that. The book of Exodus, a lot of it also. A lot of it also. I mentioned one thing by Moshe Rabbeinu, and not, and not wanting to go to save the Jewish people. Right? But at face value, what do you mean? God's giving you direct commands. God revealed himself to you through a burning bush. He's telling you, you're the one to take them out. And I'm going to be with you. And they won't believe me. God's like, I'm behind you. What do you mean they won't believe you? He says, fine, I'll give you the stick trick. Aaron will speak for you. You don't have to worry. But there was something much deeper going on. Moses understood according to nature. Sound like you're sending me, it's a waste of time here. The Jewish people never get out. It's impossible according to nature. One explanation. Myriad explanations. But one explanation is they ain't getting out. There's no possible way for them to get out. So Moses is like, it's a suicide mission. You're sending me there. Not going to change. They never get out. God's right, you're right. They don't get out. 100% of the time they don't get out, but you're forgetting one big X factor. I'm the big X factor. I can change nature, and I'll take them above nature. That's potentially one of the reasons God takes them above nature. And he changes nature. Because if it wasn't, because according to nature, it never happens. 10 times out of 10, they don't get out. Never happens. Never happens. So we look at a world, seems like utter chaos, right? In many ways. We can't make heads or tails of it. In general, in our own lives, why we have to go through certain things. And again, simple explanation is either we did things to cause it, or maybe our soul has to go through it or whatever. But a lot of times we'll never figure it out. It doesn't really matter. We have to deal with what the consequences are. We have to not get caught up in, in bad habits and, and all that, which is true. But at the same time, we can't overthink. When a person overthinks things, it's like the Rambam and others say, that a person learns through Tanakh and they try and figure out when the Messiah is going to come. According to their calculation, the Messiah doesn't come, they'll be a heretic. The Messiah is not going to come, the Messiah didn't come. And the Messiah, according to my calculation, therefore I don't have to keep Torah mitzvahs anymore. The whole thing is false. Yeah, the Rambam says, if you look through Tanakh, there are a lot of contradictions in all this. Seems to be a lot of contradictions. So because of that, he says, you don't bother trying to figure it out. You're going to learn about it, very good. Trying to pinpoint it or whatever, then you'll end up a heretic. And that's why it's forbidden. I mean, you shouldn't learn it. You shouldn't look into it if you want to. Right? But the more you do, the more confusing it is. My Rebbe would say, very good. Yeah, there are a lot of contradictions. Go further. Right? Don't worry about it. It's not something to get caught up in. We got to learn Torah to the best of our ability, but we have to understand we're not in control. There's so many things we're not in control. God's in control. You let him do what he needs to do. Well, my Rebbe would say, 95% of the time you're happy the way God runs the world in general. The other 5%, in 10 lifetimes, you'll never understand. You'll never understand. You look at it this way politically, that way politically. This one will put their spin on it, someone else put their spin on it. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's relevant to our lives. What's the problem? We want to know. We want to know what this person thinks. We want to know what the other person thinks. We want to know. We want answers. We're not giving answers. Maybe after the fact. After all said and done, in Gaza, just like the 6-Day War, what's going to happen? A lot of people are going to be writing books on what happened and why they weren't prepared and all that. Yeah, there'll be a lot of books written. But for us, on the Torah perspective, what's the bottom line? God wanted it to happen. It was a divine decree. He wanted it to happen. And, these people were on vacation and they didn't think it was going to happen. And even though they're doing all this training and blah, 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 yeah. There are going to be a lot of spins to this. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs also. But at the end of the day, we have to see the divine decree. Terrible divine decree. No question. But to say why and this, and it's because of this, and because of that, no. But my Rebbe always says, I'm not worried about Hamas. I'm not worried about Hezbollah. I'm only worried about Jews that live in the land of Israel that sin. Doesn't mean Jews who sin outside the land of Israel are any better, by any stretch. But if you're sitting in the palace of the king, the repercussions could be catastrophic. Catastrophic. Spoken many times about desecration of Shabbos and what's going on, and I got all these gay parades and different things. That's what you're afraid of. Those repercussions you're afraid of. Because you see, on that day, on October 7th, 7,500 missiles were sent. 7,500. A lot of them shot down. A lot of them shot down by the Patriot missiles, and the rest didn't hit anything. Okay. There are a lot of other terrible things that happened. It didn't happen from the missiles. So there was divine protection there. No question. Yeah. But at the same time, if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, especially in the land, we're in serious trouble. These things can happen. It's bad if you do it outside the land. You're in God's backyard. That's what happened in Sodom. Commentaries tell us. Yeah, they were so bad. Okay. But other places also bad. So you say they were worse. Why were they worse in different ways? Because they were doing it in the palace of the king. They were doing it in God's backyard. And God said, no. You want to do it somewhere else? Maybe I'll look the other way. Maybe it won't be as severe. You're doing it in my backyard? I'm going to flatten you like a pancake. I'm going to blow up the whole place. That's the fear. That's the fear. These other things, you got to say, wow, you got all these nations around and want to destroy them. Yeah. But if God is protecting us, they can't do anything, which has been pretty miraculous. Over the years, you had flare-ups. You had people being killed in suicide bombings, other things. Nothing to this extent. But it'll say the same thing. The same exact thing. We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And when you're doing that in the land and you don't care and this and that, the repercussions are catastrophic. Not just in Israel, it could be anywhere. But we feel the brunt of it. Because we're in the palace of the king. Right? Things will get worse before it's better. Hopefully not. Right? But we got to be stronger in what we do. It's got to fix up, try and fix up as much as we can. But the power only comes from our enemies when we don't do what we're supposed to do. And that is what happens in Tanakh. You read all throughout Tanakh, it's like a sine curve. Jews do the right thing, very good, we're up here. Jews do the wrong thing, they go down. They go up, they go down, right? Just like a sine curve. That's what happens. You're going to say we're on a much lower level, this and that. These people don't know anything. Okay. Even so, their desecration Shabbos in public. They're saying we're going to build these, these railroads even on Shabbos. Koach nefesh. What are we koach nefesh? And you got religious people in the government right in front of their face. They don't leave the government. I mean, listen, this is a serious thing. They're not small things, not to get into politics. But it's like you're saying it's okay, even if you're in power. When you're in power, much better be in the opposition, at least not going on underneath your nose. So there are kickbacks somewhere. Because the religious party should leave the government anytime any of these things happen. But they don't. So you say there are other things going on, things behind the scenes, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, something's going on. Doesn't smell so good. How can they be part of that? It's going on right in front of their face. They know it. You tell the government should do this, should do that. They don't care. They don't care, bottom line. How can you be part of it? If we're not part of it, it'll be much worse. Yeah, that's the argument. That is the argument. But person's also guilty by association. Just because you're not doing it and whatever, and it'd be worse if you weren't there, you're still guilty by association. But obviously not everyone agrees. People say you have to do it, you have to be there, whatever, even if it's bad. Even if there are other things going on. So again, you're allowing desecration of Shabbos to go on right under your nose. There's not going to be payback for that? Serious payback, God forbid. You know better, but you're getting portfolios and you're getting money and other things. It's kind of hard to fathom if you think about it. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. There are no questions. I'm going to sign out. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or orthodoxconversion.com, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on the Torah portion of the week, Q&As, ethics of our fathers, book of Leviticus, controversial issues. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, CHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, which I'm good beginning of the day.